All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice exam series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Jen wants her child to eat more vegetables. At dinner, Jen will say, "You need to eat more before I give you a treat," and then will slide the plate of vegetables closer to the child. What type of prompt is Jen using? So we're starting off with a prompt question, and this one's easier because the question is telling us a prompt is being used and is only asking us to identify what type of prompt. So let's think about how the situation plays out because with the prompt, we're going to have a SD and the prompt is going to follow that SD. So if Jen wants the child to eat more vegetables and then Jen says, "You need to eat more before I give you a treat," that's going to be our SD. She's telling the child, "Eat more before I give you a treat," and then slides the plate of vegetables closer to the child. So the prompt is the sliding the plate of vegetables closer to the child. The SD is "Eat more before I give you a treat," and then the prompt occurs. So if Jen is sliding this plate of vegetables closer to the child, what type of prompt is Jen using? A stimulus prompt. What is the difference between a stimulus prompt and a response prompt? With the stimulus prompt, the prompt is acting directly on a stimulus in the environment, meaning we're changing the position of the prompt, we're changing the size of the prompt, the color, we're changing, or the stimulus, I should say, we're changing this something about the stimulus, right? In this case, what is Jen doing? Well, she's moving the position of the plate of vegetables. So she is manipulating the stimulus in order to prompt the child. So this looks like a stimulus prompt. Now, if you look at B, a response prompt acts directly on the response itself. An example of a response prompt would be a modeling prompt or a physical prompt, maybe a gesture prompt, where we're not manipulating the stimulus, right? But we are acting directly on the response. In this case, Jen isn't manipulating the response, rather the plate, which is the stimulus. C, an errorless prompt. With an errorless prompt, we are preventing all errors from occurring. If Jen is only sliding the plate of vegetables closer, errors can still occur, so this is not an errorless prompt. And then D, graduated guidance. Graduated guidance is a type of physical prompting where we use just as much physical prompting as necessary, and then we fade it. This is not graduated guidance because it is not a physical prompt. The type of prompt that Jen is using is a stimulus prompt because she's acting on the stimulus in the environment. A toddler who is going through potty training no longer wants to wear a pull up. However, if the toddler has an accident, the toddler's mom makes them wear a pull up the rest of the day. Now, the toddler's rate of accidents has decreased. Why? We have a behavior change question and what looks like a consequence question. And so, with behavior change and consequences, we're always asking ourselves, how did the behavior change? Meaning, did it increase? Did it decrease? No change. In this case, the toddler's rate of accidents decreased. And if we see a behavior has decreased, we know it's not reinforcement because reinforcement only increases. So, it has to be punishment or extinction. Now, in this case, the toddler's going through potty training. They don't want to wear a pull up. If the toddler has an accident, the toddler's mom makes them wear a pull up the rest of the day. Has the toddler's mom added something, taken something away, or withheld something? Well, she's added something, right? She's added the pull up to the environment. She's made the toddler wear the pull up the rest of the day. As a result of this intervention, where a toddler has an accident, mom makes them wear pull up, what has happened? Well, the behavior has decreased. So to me, this looks like a pretty clear punishment procedure. So if you look at A and B, both have reinforcement. If the behavior decreases, it can never be reinforcement. That cannot change. Reinforcement only increases. It will never decrease behavior. So A and B are immediately out. That leaves us with C and D, positive punishment or negative punishment. Well, we know the toddler's mom is adding the pull-up as a result of the accident. So when we add something, is that positive or negative? That's positive. Negative, we're taking it away. So we're adding something that's decreasing behavior. It has to be C, positive punishment. If you approach consequence questions when you're practicing like this, you're going to get very good at them. And a question like this one, you're going to be able to do very quickly because it's going to become very easy. Behavior decreased, it's punishment or extinction. Mom added something, it's positive, it has to be positive punishment. A person is learning to assemble a complex piece of furniture. They initially struggle to even identify the correct parts. To help them learn, you first reinforce any attempt to touch the correct parts, then reinforce attempts to connect two parts, and gradually reinforce more complex steps until the furniture is fully assembled. Which teaching procedure are you using? The only difficult part about this question is the length of the question and then maybe the word usage. If we really attack this question, though, it's very straightforward. So we're looking at a teaching procedure. The person is learning to assemble a complex piece of furniture. In other words, we have a complex behavior. They can't even identify the correct parts at first. So to help them learn, you at first reinforce any attempt to even touch correct parts. So we're starting at the very, very bottom of this skill. If they try to touch the correct parts, you give them reinforcement. You then change that to connecting two parts. Now we're getting closer to our terminal or final behavior. And you go on and on and on, more complex steps until the furniture is assembled. So when we take a complex behavior and we have these approximations or these steps towards that behavior, and we start reinforcing as we get closer and closer to that complete behavior, which is assembling the furniture, what do we call that? Well, whenever we have approximations and we have terminal behaviors, it's going to be shaping. If we look at A, negative reinforcement 1 is not a teaching procedure, it's a consequence, right? And 2, it just says you're using reinforcement. It never says what kind. So A is out. B, shaping is what we predicted. We are reinforcing approximations. We have these steps or these approximations. First, you touch correct parts, then you connect two parts. We go on and on, more complex, more complex, more complex, until the furniture is fully assembled. We are shaping. C, prompting, because we always read all of our answer choices. There's no indication of prompts here. All we know is you're reinforcing as they get closer to that complete behavior. And then D, an abolishing operation. An abolishing operation has to do with motivating operations. It has nothing to do with this question. Now, fluency is important because if you're fluent, you know D should never even be considered. If you're not fluent, you might start to talk yourself into answer D just because maybe it looks good. But we know it has nothing to do with this question. The teaching procedure you're using here is shaping. You're reinforcing approximations of the behavior until we reach that final terminal behavior. Bob frequently screams when they want a toy that is out of reach. After conducting a functional assessment, it is determined that the screaming gains access to the toy. Which of the following interventions would be most effective in teaching Bob a more appropriate way to request the toy? So let's read that again, right? It's kind of wordy. The question wants to know how are we going to be, or what intervention is going to be effective in teaching Bob a more appropriate way to request a toy. So immediately we know we're teaching Bob a new behavior, right? Because we're trying to replace Bob screaming when they want the toy. So we know we're trying to teach a replacement, and we know screaming gains access. So the function is tangible. We want a replacement behavior for screaming. How are we going to do that? A, consistently ignoring the child's screams and only providing the toy when the child is quiet. Well, if we're just ignoring the child's screams and only providing toy when the child is quiet, well, that's more of a differential reinforcement of other behaviors. We're not really teaching him a new way to request a toy. Remaining quiet and being reinforced for not screaming is not requesting the toy. They're just being reinforced for not screaming. Maybe that decreases screaming, but it doesn't necessarily teach a new way to request the toy. B, implementing a timeout procedure each time the child screams for the toy. Same thing as A punishment here where we're putting them in timeout and trying to decrease screaming. We're still not teaching a replacement. So we might be decreasing the screaming temporarily, but there's nothing there to replace that behavior. C, creating a token economy system where the child earns tokens for quiet behavior and can exchange them for the toy. Again, what is the child earning reinforcement for? Quiet behavior. We're trying to teach them how to request the toy, not just remain quiet. So C still is an issue. D, teaching the child to say toy please and immediately providing the toy when the child uses this phrase. Obviously, D is the best answer. We're going to teach them to say toy please. And then when they say toy please, we're going to reinforce teaching them this appropriate way to request the toy. So A, B, and C all suffer from the same problem that we're decreasing screaming, but we're not necessarily teaching a replacement. And the question wants to know, how are we going to teach an appropriate way to request a toy? And that's going to be D, teaching the child a new phrase and reinforcing when they use that phrase. A behavior technician receives feedback from their supervisor regarding their data collection procedures. The supervisor points out specific instances where the data was inconsistent and provides clear instructions on how to improve. Which of the following is the most appropriate response from the technician? This question is all about taking feedback, implementing feedback appropriately. This is a task list item, extremely important for you to be able to do this as a technician when working with your behavior analytic supervisor. Now, in this case, what's the most appropriate response? Where this technician was told by their supervisor that there are problems with the data, it's inconsistent, and on top of that, they are giving clear instructions on how to improve. So they're giving feedback on top of giving some training and instruction. How should they respond? A, attempt to justify why the data was incorrect. It doesn't really matter why the data was incorrect. It's incorrect. And so the supervisor spotted it. It's time to move forward, right? It doesn't matter exactly why it was incorrect. We now need to implement the new, better way and the right way to collect this data. B, explain that they never received enough training on data collection. That might be true, but if that is the case, if you don't receive enough training, well, you should have brought that up before the data became an issue. Because now the data are an issue, you should have brought up the training issue long before it's actually a problem. C, attempt to implement the feedback next session. Yep, exactly what we do. We take the feedback, we try to implement it to the best of our ability. We ask clarifying questions if needed. And D, ignore the feedback and continue data as is. We never want to ignore the feedback. If you disagree with the feedback, then you ask questions and you try to get a better understanding. You never, ever, ever ignore the feedback completely. Most appropriate response, attempt to implement the feedback next session. Thanks for watching. Please check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. The link is below. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. As always, work hard, study hard, and we'll see you soon.